There's a moment most men know, but very few understand. A moment when you're standing in front of a woman you find interesting and suddenly your mind becomes loud. You start searching for the right line, the right question, the right strategy. Your thoughts race ahead of you, trying to calculate attraction like it's a formula. And without realizing it, you begin to interview her instead of experiencing her. Where are you from? What do you do? How was your day? Safe questions, predictable questions. Questions that sound polite, but quietly drain the energy out of the moment, because attraction is not built through interrogation, connection is not created through a checklist, and presence, a real presence, can never be faked with rehearsed curiosity. Tonight, we're going to change the way you understand conversation, not by teaching you tricks, not by giving you lines to memorize, but by shifting the way you carry yourself when you speak, the pace of your voice, the intention behind your words, and the emotional direction you create without even realizing it. Because the truth is simple. When you stop trying to impress, you become interesting. When you stop chasing reactions, you become magnetic. And when you stop asking endless questions, you finally learn how to speak with quiet confidence. This is not about manipulation. This is not about pretending to be someone you're not. This is about becoming comfortable enough with yourself that your words feel calm, deliberate, and real. Imagine walking into a room. You don't rush your steps, you don't scan desperately for attention, you allow your shoulders to relax, your breathing to slow, your mind to settle into the present moment. Because before you ever say a word, your energy speaks first. Most men underestimate this. They believe attraction begins with a perfect opener, but attraction often begins before you even speak. In the way you hold silence without anxiety, in the way your gaze feels steady rather than searching. You notice her across the room. Not because she's loud, but because she seems calm in a space that feels noisy. There's a quiet composure about her that stands out without effort. You don't rush over immediately. You allow a few seconds to observe, not in a calculated way, but in a grounded way. You let curiosity exist without pressure. Then you walk over, not fast, not hesitant, just steady. And instead of opening with a question, you begin with a statement. I feel like you're the only person here who isn't trying too hard. Notice how different that feels. You're not demanding an answer. You're not forcing her to perform, you're simply offering an observation, an invitation into your perspective. Statements create direction, questions often create pressure. And when you guide the emotional rhythm of a conversation, you naturally create a space that feels calm, slightly mysterious, and unexpectedly intimate. She smiles, maybe she laughs. Maybe she tilts her head slightly, trying to understand you. Instead of rushing to fill the moment, you allow a breath of silence. Silence is not awkward when you're comfortable with yourself. Silence becomes a canvas, a place where tension can exist without anxiety. Most men talk too much because they fear losing interest. They try to keep momentum alive with endless words. But real confidence often sounds slower, more deliberate, almost effortless. You lean slightly closer, not invading her space, just enough that your voice feels personal. I like conversations that feel unplanned. You say calmly, that one sentence shifts the dynamic. Now you're not just talking, you're creating a shared emotional atmosphere. Here's something important to understand. Boldness is not about explicit language. Boldness is about clarity. It's the willingness to say what you genuinely notice without exaggeration or pressure. There's something quietly confident about you. You add specific, grounded, real compliments that feel observational rather than performative, create warmth instead of resistance. As the conversation unfolds, you resist the urge to interrogate. Instead of asking, what do? You share a small piece of yourself. I've started valuing calm moments more than loud ones. You admit, it changes the way you see people. When you reveal something authentic first, you give her emotional permission to respond naturally without feeling examined. And that's the difference between curiosity and connection. Your tone softens slightly, not dramatic, just intentional. You notice the way she listens, the subtle pauses before she speaks, the way her expression shifts when she's thinking. You notice more than you say, you tell her. Statements like this don't corner her. They invite her to step deeper into the moment. Now, let's slow down even more, because this is where many men lose the rhythm. They feel a spark of connection, and suddenly they rush. Their voice speeds up, their energy becomes louder. They try to escalate the interaction too quickly. But attraction grows strongest in gradual pacing. You lower your voice slightly, just enough to create intimacy without intensity. I like conversations that feel a little unpredictable, you say, and then you let the words rest. You're not trying to impress her with cleverness. You're allowing curiosity to breathe. She might tease you, challenge your observation, smile in a way that suggests she's beginning to feel comfortable. Instead of reacting defensively, you lean into the playfulness. You seem calm. You say lightly, but I think there's a mischievous side you hide. Teasing works when it feels warm, never sharp, never disrespectful. The goal isn't to dominate the moment. The goal is to create a gentle push and pull that keeps the energy alive. And as the noise of the room fades into the background, something subtle begins to happen. The conversation stops feeling like effort. It starts feeling like presence. Your breathing slows. Your words become fewer but more intentional. I appreciate people who can sit in silence. You say quietly, and then you allow silence again. That silence doesn't feel empty. It feels charged, alive, calm. Because intimacy often begins where words end. Remember this clearly. You are not trying to win her over. You are exploring whether your energies align. That mindset alone removes pressure from both of you. You notice her posture relaxing, the way her shoulders soften, the way her laughter becomes quieter, more genuine. And you respond to what you genuinely observe. It's rare to meet someone who listens this carefully. You say specific compliments grounded in reality feel sincere. They create connection without overwhelming the moment. Time passes without you noticing. The conversation deepens not through dramatic confessions, but through small layers of honesty. I used to think confidence meant being loud, you admit. Now I think it means being comfortable with stillness. That kind of reflection invites emotional depth without becoming heavy. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the space between you feels warmer, not intense, not rushed, just quietly meaningful. Eventually, you sense the rhythm slowing. And instead of clinging to the interaction, you lean back slightly, grounded, calm. I'm glad I came over, you say sincerely. No performance, no pressure. Just honesty. You hold eye contact gently. Let's continue this another time. An invitation, not a demand. And whether she says yes immediately or smiles thoughtfully, you remain the same, steady, respectful, self-assured. Because real confidence is not measured by outcomes, it's measured by presence. So there's one thing I want you to remember from this moment, it's this: stop trying to fill silence with questions. Start creating moments with intention. Speak less, observe more, and let your energy guide the conversation. If this perspective changed the way you think about attraction and communication, stay connected. There's much more to explore, deeper layers of emotional intelligence, confidence, and conversations that feel real rather than rehearsed. Subscribe, stay curious, and slow everything down, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is spoken softly with calm certainty and followed by silence. Let's go deeper. Because once you understand that conversation is not an interview, a new question appears in your mind. If you're not asking endless questions, then what do you actually say? You speak from observation, from presence, from the quiet awareness of the moment unfolding in front of you. Most people move through conversations trying to prove something. They try to sound impressive, intelligent, funny, mysterious, anything that might create approval. And without realizing it, they begin performing instead of connecting. But performance creates distance. Presence creates closeness. So instead of chasing clever words, you begin to notice small details. The way she tilts her head when she listens, the way her energy shifts when she laughs, the way silence settles comfortably between sentences. And when you speak about what is real right now. You have a calm way of listening. You say quietly, no exaggeration, no pressure, just truth. Statements like this don't demand a response. They invite reflection. And reflection naturally deepens conversation without forcing it. Here's something most men never learn. Attraction grows strongest when a woman feels emotionally safe and intellectually curious at the same time. Safety comes from steadiness. Curiosity comes from unpredictability. And your role is not to control either, but to balance both through your pacing. Your voice lowers slightly. Your words become more intentional. I think people reveal themselves more through silence than through words. You say, now the conversation shifts from surface level topics into shared perspective. You're no longer exchanging information, you're exchanging ideas, and ideas create depth. She might agree, she might challenge you, she might laugh and say you're overthinking things. Instead of defending yourself, you lean into the moment with calm confidence. Maybe you say softly, but I've noticed the quietest moments are often the most honest. That's how you maintain emotional direction without dominating the interaction. Because leadership in conversation is not about control, it's about clarity. Now let's talk about pacing, because pacing is where real magnetism lives. Imagine your words as waves. If they come too fast, the moment feels chaotic. If they come too slow without intention, the energy fades. But when your rhythm feels natural, calm, steady, deliberate, people begin to relax around you. You pause between sentences. You allow space for her reactions. You don't rush to fill every silence. And gradually she starts mirroring your rhythm. That's emotional alignment. You might say something playful but grounded. You seem like someone who notices small details. You tell her. Most people miss them. Teasing doesn't need to be sharp to feel engaging. It just needs to feel observant. Here's an important shift. Instead of asking about her life directly, you share small glimpses of your own perspective. I used to think conversations were about finding common interests. You admit quietly, no, I think they're about understanding energy. Statements like this open doors without forcing her through them. And if she chooses to step deeper into the conversation, it feels natural, not pressured. You notice the atmosphere changing. The room feels quieter, even if it isn't. Your focus narrows to the moment you're sharing. Words become fewer, but more meaningful. I like moments that feel unfiltered. You say softly, where people don't feel the need to impress. There's a subtle intimacy and honesty, not the kind that overwhelms, but the kind that invites trust. Now let's address boldness, because boldness is often misunderstood. Boldness is not intensity. Boldness is not force. Boldness is clarity spoken calmly. When you notice something genuine, you allow yourself to express it respectfully, thoughtfully. There's a depth to your presence. You say, it's rare. Simple words delivered slowly can carry more emotional weight than long speeches. And when she responds, maybe with curiosity, maybe with a smile, you don't rush to escalate the interaction. You allow the moment to breathe, because attraction that grows slowly tends to last longer. You shift slightly, leaning back just enough to show comfort. I appreciate conversations that don't feel rushed. You add, again, you allow space. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is emotional oxygen. She might ask you a question now, and when she does, you answer thoughtfully, not with long monologues, but with calm sincerity, and then you return to statements, gentle observations that keep the rhythm grounded. You seem thoughtful, you say, like you weigh your words before speaking. This kind of observation shows attention, and attention feels meaningful. The deeper you move into the conversation, the more important your tone becomes. Your voice remains warm, steady, unhurried. Not overly serious, not overly playful, just balanced. I think people remember how conversations feel more than what was said. You admit. That sentence alone changes the emotional direction. Now you're both aware of the atmosphere you're creating together. You might share a light story, not to impress, but to reveal personality. A moment when you learn to slow down, a moment when silence felt powerful, something simple and real, because storytelling creates connection without interrogation. And as you speak, you notice her leaning slightly closer, listening more carefully. You don't comment on it directly. You simply continue at the same calm pace. Consistency builds trust. Eventually, your playful moment emerges. You give the impression of someone who keeps a few secrets. You say lightly, not accusatory, just curious, just warm. And if she laughs, you allow the laughter to exist without rushing into the next sentence. Let the moment live. Here's something subtle but powerful. When you're comfortable with pauses, your words begin to carry more weight. People listen more closely because nothing feels rushed, and that calm presence becomes memorable. Time continues moving, but it feels slower. You notice the way her energy matches yours, steady, relaxed, attentive, and you realize something important. Connection is not something you force, it's something you allow. As the conversation naturally approaches a turning point, you remain grounded. I like moments like this. You say quietly, they feel real. No dramatic declarations, just acknowledgement. Because acknowledgement creates emotional clarity without pressure, and when it feels right, you gently begin closing the interaction. Not abruptly, not hesitantly, just naturally. I'm glad we talked, you say with calm sincerity. You hold eye contact for a brief moment. Warm, respectful, let's continue this another time. An invitation, not an expectation. Remember this. The goal was never to avoid questions completely. The goal was to stop hiding behind them, to speak with intention, to create a rhythm that feels grounded instead of anxious. Because when you slow down, when your words come from observation rather than fear, conversations stop feeling like effort. They begin to feel like presence. Take a breath, slow your voice. Let silence exist, and notice how differently people respond when you stop trying to impress and start allowing connection to unfold naturally. There comes a point in every meaningful conversation where words begin to matter less and awareness begins to matter more. You start noticing energy instead of sentences, rhythm instead of content, presence instead of performance. And this is where most people either deepen the connection or quietly lose it, because when the moment becomes real, many rush to fill it with noise. But you don't. You slow down even more. You let your posture soften. Your breathing stays calm. Your voice lowers slightly, not to sound dramatic, but to create a space that feels personal. I think the best conversations are the ones that don't feel planned. You say quietly, notice what happens here. You're not asking for validation. You're not trying to steer her toward a specific reaction. You're simply sharing a thought and allowing her to meet you there if she chooses. And maybe she agrees. Maybe she smiles in a way that feels more relaxed than before. The energy becomes lighter, warmer, more natural. This is where emotional awareness becomes important. You begin to listen not only to what she says, but to how she says it, the pauses between her words, the moments where she hesitates slightly before revealing something genuine. And when she shares something real, you don't interrupt, you don't rush to respond, you listen fully, because real listening is one of the most powerful forms of attraction. When you finally speak again, your words feel intentional. I like how thoughtful you are when you speak. You tell her. Simple observations delivered slowly carry weight. Time moves differently now. The conversation has shifted from curiosity to comfort, from surface level exchange to quiet connection. And you don't need to force depth, you allow it to appear naturally. You might share another perspective. I think people reveal who they are through the way they handle silence. You say, she might laugh or reflect or simply hold eye contact a little longer. And that moment, that shared stillness becomes more meaningful than any clever line. Here's something most men never realize. The strongest emotional tension is not created by intensity, but by restraint, by saying just enough and then allowing space. You notice how the environment around you feels distant now. Conversations nearby fade into the background. Your focus remains grounded in the present. You don't rush ahead mentally. You don't think about outcomes. You simply exist inside the interaction. And because you're not chasing approval, your words begin to feel more honest. I used to think confidence meant always knowing what to say. You admit quietly. No, I think it means being comfortable when you don't. Vulnerability like this, calm, understated, invites authenticity without overwhelming the moment. She might respond with her own reflection, something personal, something thoughtful, and when she does, you acknowledge it gently. That's a rare perspective, you say. No exaggeration, no dramatic praise, just recognition. As the conversation continues, you allow lightness to return. A small smile, a playful tone. You seem like someone who enjoys meaningful moments more than loud ones. You say, playfulness keeps the interaction alive, but your grounding keeps it sincere. Now let's talk about emotional pacing near the later stages of a conversation, the part most people misunderstand. When connection begins to feel real, many either cling too tightly or withdraw too quickly. But balance is where confidence lives. You remain present without becoming attached to an outcome. You lean back slightly, signaling comfort. I appreciate conversations that feel this natural, you say calmly, and you let the words rest. Because sometimes the most powerful statement is followed by nothing at all. She might hold your gaze, she might nod quietly, and in that shared stillness, something subtle settles between you, a sense of mutual respect, not rushed, not forced, just real. Eventually, every conversation reaches a natural turning point. The energy softens, the rhythm slows, and this is where graceful endings matter. Instead of dragging the interaction beyond its natural flow, you acknowledge the moment with calm clarity. I'm really glad we talked. You say sincerely. No pressure, no expectation, just honesty. You hold eye contact gently, warm, respectful, grounded. I'd like to continue this another time, you add. An invitation, not a demand. And whether she agrees immediately or simply smiles thoughtfully, you remain the same, because your confidence was never tied to her response. It came from your presence. Now step back from the scene for a moment, reflect on what just happened. You didn't rely on endless questions. You didn't perform for approval. You didn't chase reactions. Instead, you created an atmosphere calm, intentional, quietly engaging. That is the real meaning behind don't ask questions. It was never about avoiding curiosity. It was about learning to speak with direction, to observe deeply, and to allow conversation to feel like a shared experience rather than an interrogation. When you slow your words, people listen differently. When you embrace silence, tension becomes comfortable. And when your presence feels grounded, connection grows naturally. So the next time you find yourself in front of someone interesting, remember this: you don't need perfect lines. You don't need rehearsed strategies. You only need awareness, patience, and the courage to be fully present, because attraction built on calm energy feels effortless. Connection built on authenticity lasts longer. And conversations guided by intention become unforgettable. Take a moment now, reflect on how you enter conversations, reflect on how you listen, reflect on how you allow silence to exist. And if you're ready to develop a calmer, more grounded way of connecting with people, subscribe, stay curious, and continue learning. Until next time, slow your pace, lower your voice, and let your presence speak before your words ever do.